Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is law. U.S. law, and how so many people talk about issues they know so little about. In this case, immigration law. In the United States, it is not illegal to be an anti-Semite. Hating Jews and hating Israel is deplorable, but it is not a deportable offense. Understanding this allows for making sense out of what is really happening in the United States regarding the deportation of what some call pro-Palestinian activists. And the same people, by the way, are referred to by called anti-Israel protesters. It should be noted also that the laws protecting the freedom of speech in the United States and the freedom to protest in the United States are far more expansive than they are in most other democracies in the world, actually probably the most. Take Germany. Post-World War II Germany established limits to freedom of speech and made it illegal to speak, promote, propagate, promulgate, or write anti-Jewish and anti-Israel hatred. Freedom of speech is limited in Germany. The framers of this German law felt it necessary to restrict their freedom of speech given their country's history and the rise of Hitler. To this day, those laws are aggressively enforced. In England and in Canada too, they have serious restrictions to their freedom of speech. Even in Israel, for security and other reasons, there are limits to the expression, and there exists a very aggressive military censor in Israel. The fact is that the United States is one of the most liberal protectors of freedom of expression. Voltaire was a notorious hater of Jews. I do not quote him often, but I do make an exception for a quote that was attributed to him, but was actually in fact made up, fabricated, and not by him at all, but actually fabricated by Evelyn Beatrice Hall, whose pen name was C.G. Talleyrand. Voltaire died in 1778. The earliest evidence of this quote appeared 128 years later in the year 1906, when it appeared in the volume entitled The Friends of Voltaire, penned by Talleyrand. She was writing a book that was entitled De l'Esprit, On the Mind. It was a book that was universally panned, even in France's parliament and even in the Sorbonne. In the writing hall, aka Talleyrand, wrote of the reaction that Voltaire had upon discovering that this book had been burned. Hall describes Voltaire's reaction, which she later admitted was a total fabrication. As if Voltaire was speaking, she wrote, that the acclaimed philosopher, historian, and satirist exclaimed, and this is the quote, "What a fuss about an omelet! How abominably unjust to persecute a man for such an airy trifle as that! I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." That's the quote. Years later, she admitted to fabricating the quote, and yet, those words live on and on. Such is the power of the freedom of speech. Fight to the death the right to say it. In the United States, the freedom extends even to people with whom you vehemently disagree. And yet, there are still limits. Those limits extend to student visa holders and green card holders who, in order to be eligible for those visas and cards, signed that they would not act against U.S. interests or support U.S. enemies. There are also limits to supporting terror groups like Hamas, and groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Those limitations extend even to U.S. citizens who are not visa or green card holders. They're citizens. In the United States, supporting or receiving support for or from a terrorist group is a federal crime, and a serious crime at that. So, what does support mean? The term often tossed around is material support. The legal term means either giving or receiving something substantive, tangible, to or from a terror group, which is defined by being on one of the two lists in the State Department or in the White House. Hamas is on both of those lists, as is Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The applicable law is 18 U.S. Code 2339B, providing material support or resources to designated foreign terrorist organizations. The section that is important for our discussion is section H. H, provision of personnel. No person, I'm quoting, may be prosecuted under this section in connection with the term personnel unless that person has knowingly provided, attempted to provide, or considered to provide a foreign terrorist organization with one or more individuals, or maybe, or including himself, to work under the terrorist organization's direction or control, or to organize, manage, supervise, or otherwise direct the operation of that organization. Individuals who act entirely independently of the foreign terrorist organization to advance its goals and objectives shall not be considered working under the foreign terrorist organization's direction and control. Now, it is obvious to anyone and everyone who watched the footage and saw the still images of the protests that have plagued the streets and campuses across the United States since October 7th, that those were centrally organized, that they followed an identical playbook from campus to campus. Identical signs, identical leaflets, identical chants, identical slogans, identical tents, the same tents on almost every campus. The protests were pro-Hamas protests. They were not just anti-Israel protests. And being anti-Israel is not illegal. Supporting Hamas in an organized fashion, I emphasize that has links to Hamas is a violation of U.S. Code 32339B. I just read it to you. And that's a crucial point. It's not and should not be a question of freedom of speech, but one of support for terror groups. Deport those who can be deported. Prosecute those who violate this law. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from Ynet. It was published on May 9th, 2025, and it's by Adam Scott Bellows. He's new on my radar, and we are discussing a second column by him in as many weeks. I'm impressed by his writing and his insight. This piece is entitled Crossing the Rubicon, Dave Portnoy, Barstool, and Breaking Point for Anti-Semitism in America. Subtitled, Opinion. In the Philadelphia bar, a neon sign reading F the Jews marked a chilling new low until Barstool's Dave Portnoy took a stand, offering a rare, unapologetic rebuke of anti-Semitism that could signal a cultural turning point. Bellows addresses a big issue. How does one deal with Jew hatreds? And he analyzes Dave Portnoy's response. This is how Bellows begins. Every movement has its Rubicon, the moment after which you can't go back. I think we just crossed it. It happened, of all places, in the Barstool Sports Bar in Philadelphia. A group of young people flashed a sign that said, F the Jews, during bottle service. They smiled, they posed, they filmed it. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't theoretical, it wasn't some academic symposium about Zionism and identity politics. It was raw, open, unapologetic Jew hatred in the middle of an American bar, and then something shocking happened. Dave Portnoy didn't explain it away. He didn't hide. He didn't issue a PR-filtered apology at 2 a.m. He got mad, furious, publicly. And then he acted. He fired the employees involved. He named the patrons responsible. He made it clear that anti-Semitism isn't edgy. It's evil. And for a man who built his brand on pushing the boundaries of free speech and frat boy humor, that line, that boundary wasn't blurred. It was red, bold, and immovable. Bellows now paraphrases Portnoy, and he describes Portnoy's rage and his anger, and then shows Portnoy's transition. Bellows continues, this could be the moment that breaks the cycle of Jewish invisibility in American pop culture. The moment someone with influence, reach, and absolutely nothing to gain finally stood up and said, no, we are not doing this. Not on my watch, not in my bar. Let's be clear. This wasn't some polite disagreement over Israel. This wasn't some left-wing student group doing mental gymnastics about decolonization. This was F the Jews in neon, in a crowd in America in 2025. Now, Portnoy suggests a response to teach the haters of Jews about Jew hatred, and this is how Bellows relates it. Portnoy proposed punishment, Sending those involved to Auschwitz is well-intentioned and sincere, but let me be honest, I don't think that's enough. Auschwitz is sacred ground, yes, but it's also abstract to people who treat anti-Semitism like a meme. A museum isn't enough. If we're serious about showing people what Jew hatred looks like, then take them to the Nova Festival site in Israel, where Jews were butchered for dancing. Take them to the homes in Ofakim and Be'eri, where entire families were burned alive. Let them smell the consequences. Let them see the anti-Semitism does. We are way past the point of academic enlightenment and curated exhibits. We need real exposure. We need moral confrontation. Bellows concludes that Dave Portnoy responded. He did something. He actually did something. He acted. And Bellows writes, still, what Dave Portnoy did matters. In a world where celebrities and influencers apologize for Jews, and second, it's inconvenient to defend them, Dave did the opposite. He used his platform to defend his people, and not with hashtags, but with action. For once, the Jewish community didn't have to beg for someone to care. Dave cared, and he did something about it. And that would be the first honest, no bull BS response we've seen from a public figure since October 7th. So yeah, maybe it happened in the bar. Maybe it happened with bottle service and a neon sign, but maybe that's exactly where the Rubicon had to be crossed. Because when hating Jews becomes cool again, the only thing that can stop it is courage. And this week, Dave Portnoy showed what that looks like. No excuses, no more silence. We've crossed the line, and now it's time to fight back. Very good insight, very, very important questions and analysis. Thank you, Adam Scott Bellows. Next up is a column which is also from Ynet. It's by Itamar Eichner, and it was published on May 8th, 2025. It's entitled Surprises, Frustration, and Concern in Israel, Trump's Zigzagging Policy and What's Behind It. Subtitled Analysis, Trump's halt to strikes on the Houthis, which blindsided Israel, was a step too far. Talks with Iran, Saudi deals, Turkey ties, and Gaza policy shifts all signal he's prioritizing U.S. gain over Israel. Thus, Jerusalem must ensure Israeli interests align with American ones. This says everything, and this is how Eichner begins. According to insiders, when the U.S. presidential race was between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu favored Biden, assuming the Democrat was strongly pro-Israel and that Netanyahu would know how to maneuver the system to swerve Israeli interests. But once Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris entered the picture, the situation became more complicated. Throughout, Israeli officials have been aware of the Republican Party's staunch support, but Trump is no typical Republican. Above all, he's guided by the ideology of MAGA, Make America Great Again, a worldview shaped by risk management and maximizing U.S. interests. Eichner now explains that there is serious division in the Republican Party on foreign policy issues, which most people don't realize. Eichner then writes, within the Republican Party, foreign policy is a divisive issue. On one side are traditional Republicans like Mike Waltz, strong supporters of Israel who back military action against Iran. On the other are neo-isolationists like Don Jr., Trump's son, and Vice President J.D. Vance, who oppose military entanglements, favor focusing on domestic issues, and lead a more isolationist line. For now, following Waltz's removal as the National Security Advisor, the later camp seems to be gaining the upper hand. And while most of the officials appointed to the foreign and defense positions are nominally pro-Israel, Israel appears to be losing ground. Now Eichner discusses Iran and U.S. attitudes. He writes, the U.S. is racing toward a new nuclear agreement and has openly discussed allowing Iran access to nuclear energy. Israel was notified about these negotiations only at the last minute and was stunned. Eichner now explains that Israeli leaders are frustrated with Trump, and this is why. Eichner explains, Jerusalem's frustration with Trump's conduct is increasingly hard to conceal. When Trump decided to halt attacks on the Houthis, Israel wasn't even updated. It found out from the news. That move, many felt, went too far. The message to the region was clear. Israel is no longer a top U.S. priority. But the question of whether Trump turned his back on Israel is a bigger question, and Eichner actually begins to ask that. He asks, has Trump abandoned Israel? He answers, it depends on who you ask. Some argue that he was never truly with us. Trump is not deeply committed to his own policies, which often shift, and Israeli officials are struggling to influence his decisions. If Biden had taken the steps Trump has in recent weeks, Netanyahu would likely have flown to Washington to address Congress. But now his hands are tied, mostly because Trump is perceived as most pro-Israel president ever. Israel must now grapple with how to remain relevant in evolving American worldview. There are still those in Washington who genuinely care about Israel, including Senator Marco Rubio, Businessman Steve Witkoff, and the newly appointed U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who just made a historic official visit to ancient Shiloh. Eichner concludes by writing that the relationship is multifaceted and that Israel needs to see and understand the complexity. Some in Israel prefer to focus on the silver lining. On the Houthi front, they argue, there's been no abandonment. Trump made clear from day one that the Red Sea operation was only about restoring freedom of navigation, as agreed via the Omani mediation. He never promised to act on Houthi missile fire at Israel and continues to support Israeli defense. As for Gaza emigration, the optimists in Jerusalem believe Trump's vision still lives. It just depends on finding willing host countries. And the Iran talks. It's too soon to tell how they'll end. But without negotiations, Trump would have no justification for military action. For now, Israel can only hope the talks fail and that the military option returns to the table. An excellent column. Thank you, Itamar Eichner. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 6 cartoons today. The first cartoon is entitled Gaza War Scream Thinker Tank. It's modeled on the famous sculpture of Rodin, The Thinker. The cartoon is situated in Gaza, and an Israeli tank is shooting at the thinker. How crazy is that image? Next up are Israeli and U.S. leaders. Each one is a hammer, and Iran is a nail. This is a course to take off on Abraham Maslow's article in Psychology of Science in 1966. His thesis, aka Maslow's hammer, or also known as the law of instrument. The quote is, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The principle is that we use what is most familiar to us to solve a problem, even when it is not the best method. The cartoonist is saying that the United States and Israel are hammers. That's all they have is weapons, and they hit with them. Next up is a cartoon that follows the same line of humor and thought. It's entitled U.S. on Iran Nuclear Program. Iran is armed to the teeth, and you see the teeth. And the U.S. arrives with a few hammers and saws, very unprepared for the enormous task of disarming Iran. Next up, on a similar theme, is a truck filled with Iranian nukes, and the U.S. is trying to lasso it. Nearly impossible. The cartoon is entitled U.S. Controlling Iran Nuclear Program. This next cartoon is simply untrue. It's entitled Gaza Starvation, Empty Pots, Children, Rocket, Famine. There's no starvation in Gaza except for maybe the hostages. The cartoon portrays a rocket on the ground next to the children, and on the ground they have empty plates. The rocket is made of kitchen pots, a funnel at the top, a colander at the bottom. Finally, a cartoon. This cartoon, at least, is entitled Mideast Conflict Nutshell, Israel, Yemen, War, Donkeys. This cartoon compares the Houthis to Israel, suggesting how unfair it is of Israel to attack the Houthis, who are using old-fashioned weapons systems, old-fashioned guns, old-fashioned ammo. I am literally sickened by this comparison. The Houthis are shooting rockets into Israel, so Israel is responding by hitting back. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. American sources told Reuters news agency that Iran supplied the Fatah 360 missiles to Russia in 2024, and the source also added that Iran plans to send short-range ballistic missile launchers to Russia as well. Palestinian Authority Chair Mahmoud Abbas's office commented on his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the celebrations marking the 80 years since the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in Moscow. According to the office's statement, during the meeting, Abbas praised, quote, the historic relationship between the Palestinians and Russia, and appreciated Russia's position supporting Palestinians. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. I want to show you this clip of Ari Spitz speaking at the Israeli embassy in D.C. on Israel Independence Day. As Special Envoy Witkoff explains, Ari lost both his legs, an arm, and a thumb on his other hand on February 27, 2024. This young man just turned 23 on the first night of Passover. This is a powerful presentation, downright inspiring. He's also a family friend. Watch this video.
But I want to just say one thing. I just met a young man here. His name Ari Spitz. He gave to the country of Israel both of his legs, his right arm, his thumb. And I just say, I wish you blessings. He's not a victim. It was really my great honor to meet you tonight.
Ari Spitz, a 23-year-old, a combat soldier in the Givati Brigade, who was injured in the battlefield in the northern part of Gaza during the war and is now here in D.C. recovering. He's also left such an impression on Special Envoy Witkoff that he mentioned him in his words a few minutes ago. Mr. Spitz.
Ambassador Dr. Leiter, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would like to start my story on October 1st, 2023. I was 21 years old and had just finished my Army service. I returned my rifle, my helmet, my vest, and I was ready to begin a new chapter in my life. 7 days later, everything changed. Hamas launched a brutal attack. Their goal was clear: to burn, kill, rape, and kidnap anyone and anything that crossed their path. In response, hundreds of thousands of Israeli soldiers, including myself, were called up. We had a new mission. In the following weeks, my friends and I did everything we can to prepare. We waited for orders, knowing what would lay ahead. And then finally the orders came. You're going into Gaza, my officer said. I would like to pause here and share with you that what I felt in those special hours before going in. At first, there was a stomachache. The reality settled in. My life was about to be in danger. But with that came a deep understanding and responsibility. I'd like to share with you my 4 guiding thoughts from those moments. First, as a Jew, I felt the deep privilege of defending my people, a nation with thousands of years of history, a nation that has suffered from so much anti-Semitism. My great-grandparents who survived the Holocaust could never have imagined a moment like this, where a Jewish soldier could stand with a rifle and protect the Jewish nation. Second, as an Israeli, a citizen of a country that just turned 77, a young country that went through so much, a country now facing threats from Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. I entered Gaza with the clear understanding that Israel must continue to exist. Israel must thrive. It must remain a safe place for every Jew in the world. Third, as an American citizen, I felt a responsibility to support the United States' greatest ally, Israel, to stand for what is right. And finally, as a human being, I knew this war was more than a conflict between nations. This war is about morality, of standing up against evil, against people who wake up one morning and believe it is acceptable to murder, rape, and kidnap. Today, just as the last 577 days, there are still 59 hostages being held in Gaza, deep in dark tunnels, starving with no access to medical care. These four pillars stayed with me every day throughout the 4 months I was fighting in Gaza. Every sleepless night, every meal of tuna from a can. They reminded me why I'm risking my life. After 4 months of intense fighting, on February 27, 2024, my unit, Givati Brigade, entered another building to search for weapons and terrorists, which had become our standard routine. We cleared the first floor, then my officer moved towards the staircase to climb up to the second. On the bottom of the staircase, he discovered a tunnel entrance. He reported it immediately, but before we could evacuate, the tunnel was exploded by terrorists. Both my officers were killed instantly. 10 more were injured, including me. Soldiers from the building next door rushed in. They applied tourniquets and called for the field doctor. When the doctor reached me, he thought I was already dead. He placed his fingers on my neck to check the pulse, just to make sure. He felt a very weak one. He ordered to immediately evacuate me, as he realized he had limited time to save my life. I was evacuated first in an armed vehicle and in a helicopter. I reached the operating room 42 minutes after the explosion. I was intubated and sedated for 6 weeks. During that time, when the doctors were fighting for my life, I received 35 units of blood and went through 8 surgeries. When I finally woke up, with the help of amazing medical care and God's miracles, a new journey began, a journey back to life. In this journey, I carry those 4 thoughts with me every single day. I believe we have a responsibility to stand up, to fight evil, to bring back the 59 hostages, and to build a better future. So I want to thank you all for standing with Israel, for caring, for helping, whether you're a Jew, Israeli, American, or simply human. I am asking you to continue in this important mission and help Israel fight evil. Fighting is not only with rifles or tanks, but with every action, every moment, and every decision we make. Together, we are not only making the world a safer place to live in, but a better one too. God bless Israel. God bless those who stand with Israel. God bless the United States of America.
I'm proud to know this young man. He's a hero. I'm proud to know him and his family. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.